Hello and good afternoon, and welcome to my YouTube channel at Let's Chat About You Today. And today I have a very new guest, and his name is Adrian Fisk. Hello, Adrian.
Hi there, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And just a little bit of background. I met Adrian way back in 2011 when he had just returned from India. And we met because we had a mutual friend. I think she was a friend, Yasmin Hales Hanau. I think that's how you pronounce her name, who was my anthropology teacher at Birkbeck College. And on this particular day, Adrian joined us for a walkabout in East London. And the theme of the walkabout was looking at street art. And I should say, I was very uh, unknowledgeable about the street art of East London. And we walked around, and my eyes were opened to the most magnificent artistry painted on the walls. And that's where I met Adrian. And Adrian told me he was a photographer. So, Adrian, just a little bit of introduction about yourself will be really, really good for us to hear.
Well, I'm a photojournalist of some years, since really professionally shooting since 1995. And more recently, I've turned my hand at documentary filmmaking. I'm still making photographic projects. I've changed my business model so that the bulk of my revenue is coming from filmmaking. But the common denominator between my photographic and film work is telling the stories of our weird and wonderful and sometimes troubled world.
Yes, I'm actually going to start with a quote that Adrian wrote about his book, which we're going to be exploring in a little while. The book is called Until the Last Oak Falls. And he says, I believe in a resilient and regenerative world where society is just and fair. Very strong statement. But before we go into the book, I want to ask Adrian about something that happened when he was a very young man that I would say, or maybe you'd say, changed the course of your life. I believe when you went to Bangladesh. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what happened when you went to Bangladesh and what year was that?
Well, it was 1991. I just turned 20, and with a friend of mine, we both set off from South Devon as two young men, and we went to go and do voluntary work in Bangladesh. And whilst we were there, this big cyclone hit, and we'd been sort of traveling down to the coastline. Actually, we were going to take a couple of days off from the paraplegic center where we were working,
Hmm.
and the cyclone hit the coastline and it missed where we were. But looking at the newspapers the next day, we were aware that something very serious had happened.
Hmm.
And being the young, adventurous men we were, we said, let's go and have a look. And we went, and it actually took us 24 hours to get there,
Hmm.
despite it being not very far. But the nature of Bangladesh and river deltas is it's very complex to traverse, especially in 1991. And when we got to the area, the first thing we saw was this um, large ship slash small oil shipping vessel had been washed in about 2 kilometers inshore.
Hmm.
And I thought, wow, that's really, really something. So we were basically mistaken as journalists because we were the first Westerners on the scene, and I had a fancy looking camera. I like taking pictures,
Yeah.
nothing more than that. And we were mistaken as journalists. And we were told that if we wanted to go to the really badly hit area, to come back early the next day, which we did, and then we were taken off to what we thought was the port, but it wasn't the port, it was actually the airport.
Hmm.
And then by this time there was a load of the sort of world's media, international media had arrived, and this old Russian helicopter landed that was taking aid out to the islands,
Hmm.
doing aid relief drops. And someone ran and said there's room for two more journalists. Only two journalists were allowed on the
Hmm.
helicopter.
Hmm.
And lots of hands went up, and my friend Mark and I were selected to go on the helicopter. So we ran onto the helicopter, and the helicopter took off and was riding out across all of the devastation, of which I had my head out of the porthole, looking and taking pictures at, all that had been destroyed below us. And whilst I was doing that, I had the realization, in fact, you could call it an epiphany, because I realized that if I had a camera in my hand, I could go anywhere. Camera was my passport into any situation. And from that moment, I became a photographer and I've never
Hmm.
looked back.
That was a defining moment. So in a way, would you say it led you to the career that you didn't have before, but you did have for the future?
Yeah, well,
Um,
I was only 20 years old, so I didn't have a career, but I was going to go to Newcastle Business School where I had a place.
oh,
And I came back a photojournalist. So,
so
yeah,
you never went to the business school?
no, although it might have been a good idea if I had.
Well, I don't know. I think your career in photography, for me, sounds a lot more interesting.
For
But
sure.
also, what did it do for you in that moment? Did you see the world differently from being up in the helicopter, looking at the devastation, taking photographs?
Well, there's something about flying above something where you're somewhat detached from it. So
Mm,
it's a sort of the experiential nature of that is slightly abstract. So, you're flying across death and destruction,
mm,
but you're not sort of right in it. So
yes.
it's a strange relationship. But I
Yeah.
think it was just the realization, and because I was slightly removed from it, maybe that allowed me to realize the potential of becoming a photographer, and that the camera was my passport into any situation.
Yeah. And also taking photographs from that height. Um, what was your kind of perspective on looking down into all of that? How- Is that a vague question I'm asking you?
Um, well, I mean, I think I mean, we were completely shocked. I mean, you have to remember, so Bangladesh, the average height above sea level is about 4 inches. What's that, like 6, 7 centimeters?
Yeah, yeah.
What caused the devastation was essentially it was a tidal wave, well, very much like a tsunami.
Mm,
So the cyclone whips up this storm, and then it creates this wave that was 30 feet high, so 10 meters high, traveling at 90 miles an hour. So like that's what, like 150 kilometers an hour.
yeah.
So you've got this wall of water traveling at vast speed above a land that's 4 inches, 6, 7 centimeters high.
Mm,
So when it hit the land, it absolutely obliterated it. So we when we got there, we wanted to go to one of the worst hit areas, which we did. And when we got there, we went, well, there's nothing here. And
yeah,
the reason there was nothing there was because it had been destroyed on a sort of nuclear bomb scale. It absolutely obliterated it so badly you couldn't even recognize there was human habitation there.
yeah.
So we were in a state of shock, and that shock continued because when we came back from the helicopter after the ride out, um, the next day we went to a very badly hit area, and actually one of the villages where about 12,000 people have been killed,
Mm,
and we were right there in amongst all the people that have been killed,
yeah.
and that was obviously a very profound experience because we were witnessing uh, death on a untold scale.
Massive scale.
136,000 people were killed. So there was a lot of bodies. So, as young 20-year-olds in amongst that was, yeah, yeah, life-changing for sure.
Mm, mm. And so, how long after that episode did you leave Bangladesh? Did you continue to stay there for a while?
We didn't stay there that long because we were, you know, we were obviously pretty overwhelmed by our
Mm,
experience.
mm,
Um, though I have to add, the whole thing was really quite abstract. I mean, to go into such an extreme environment, it's quite hard to sort of make sense of that, to sort of reconcile what you had witnessed.
Mm,
And so on the one hand, it was very real, and on the other hand, it was sort of slightly abstract. I mean, I remember, when we came back from that town, I think it was called Bashkali, something town, a tiny village where 12,000 people had been killed, and eating sort of Chinese food that evening in a restaurant with my friend. And actually, we this sort of very well-known photojournalist had sort of befriended us, and the three of us were sort of eating and just couldn't understand, just trying to make sense of everything. I remember there just eating my food. So here I
yeah,
am, just a human eating food in this restaurant, and yet being and seeing all these killed people. So it was
yeah.
very, the whole thing was really quite strange to get your head around. So after that, we were pretty keen to leave Bangladesh, and
Mm,
actually we went into India,
yeah.
uh, and then just a couple of days being in India, Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated. So
Yes. Oh my
everywhere we were
goodness.
going,
Yeah.
things were
You
things
were
were
you were
quite
in the
phenomenal.
right place at the wrong time, or the other way around, maybe.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
wrong
yeah.
place at
Well,
the right time.
yeah. So and
I
then
remember that event very well, the Rajiv
yeah, well,
Gandhi being
yeah, well,
assassinated.
of course, yes, you would, yeah.
Yeah,
It was a
I
profound
remember.
shock to the country.
Yes, because his family was so, when I use the word esteemed, I'm careful how I use the word esteemed, but very well known, very powerful family.
Hmm.
And he was still quite a youngish man in his early 40s, I think, maybe somewhere
Hmm.
around there.
Hmm.
I remember that. I myself would have been, no, I was going to say I would have been traveling to India, but I didn't. I had, as you know, I had lived in India I was born there. But I went back to India, I think, a little bit after the 1990s on a regular basis. So I remember that, especially I remember Delhi. But, you just talked about being in the midst of devastation. And I can imagine it's very difficult to understand your own feelings. It's almost like you shut down in a way. You withdraw to some extent. And a very small incident, very small little example for me today, which I'm going to come on to a bit later on. Today we have four elm trees in our garden that got Dutch elm disease. And we were told a long time ago we had to cut them down. So today I got a guy in to cut it down. And I stood with my camera, with my phone, taking a video. And he was expert tree cutter, and he cut from the bottom, not from the top. I thought he would cut the branch at the top. He cut from the bottom. And I was watching that tree and holding my breath, waiting for the moment for it to fall. And when it fell, I could not believe the scattering of its limbs
Mm.
all over the garden. And I was in a shock. So I'm not trying to say it's how you felt, but I remember that feeling of seeing this whole thing suddenly shattered into remnants. And
Hmm.
I thought, once it's up there, now it's done. And it's a very profound feeling. And I'm feeling a little bit, well, actually quite a lot sad that this beautiful elm tree that once was magnificent
Hmm.
had become bare bones, and now it's just scattered across the garden,
Hmm.
gone. You can never
I,
put it back together again. It's
I,
it.
well, I understand that, and I think if you explore that further, the how it's just extraordinary that a house a couple of 100 years old will have preservation orders on it, grade listed and so on and so forth, but a 500-year-old tree has no preservation.
Yeah.
There's been recent cases of the restaurant. I think it was at Toby Carvery, where they cut down the 500-year-old oak.
Oh, yes, I
Uh,
remember.
I mean, I do understand that part of the reasons were sort of supposedly for safety, good old health and safety. Uh,
Mm,
but the point is that a lot of these trees don't have any preservation orders on them, and it's just extraordinary. But yeah, and to your point of like feeling emotive, witnessing the death of that tree as it collapsed. Those trees take hundreds of years
mm,
often to
yeah.
get to that
Yeah.
point, and then its life is over in mere seconds. As
Yeah.
long as it takes for a chainsaw to go through.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you returned from Bangladesh, stroke India, um, uh, did you then turn yourself completely towards taking photographs? Did you pursue that as your career, chosen career?
I went and studied photography at college.
Oh, right,
Yeah, so
okay.
I thought, right, well, I better sort of learn a bit about this.
Mm.
So I went to a college that specialized in lots of different kinds of photography. So it could be product or fashion or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
And I sort of went in a photojournalist, did all these different genres of photography, and came out a photojournalist. But at least
I
I sort of tried and tested
okay.
different
Okay.
styles to know.
Yeah. So this is a good moment in time to bring us to 1996, a
Mhm,
very pivotal time in the history of the United Kingdom, nature, world affairs. And you were very much a part of an event that took place in 1996 at the Newbury Bypass.
mhm,
And the subsequent follow-on from that was you wrote a book called Until the Last Oak Falls.
mhm,
That's a very evocative title.
mhm.
Until, it actually sends a shiver through me, thinking about my yew tree that was cut down today,
Mhm.
and then the last oak that was cut down. Was there a particular moment or a memory or an image of how that made you feel being witness to the events that took place? Or did you, in fact, feel that there was an inevitability about it, that no matter how much people cared, it was going to take place anyway?
It's I mean, all the anti-road campaigns I've worked. I mean, really, I photographed two anti-road campaigns. The first was the Stanworth Valley, the M65 in 1995,
Mm,
then going down to Newbury, which was end of 95 and earlier part of 96.
mm,
In both times, we knew the road would be built. The probability of stopping it was fairly slim.
yeah.
But the reason for, shouting about it and all the protesting and such was to create an awareness to that. The first port of call when it comes to change is awareness.
Mm,
And that's what activism is all about. Activism is really about switching people on to what is actually happening so that
mm,
they can be the potential for some kind of change.
yeah, yeah. Just to go back to the beginning when I quoted a comment that you'd made, I believe in a resilient and regenerative world where society is just and fair. When when was there a specific moment when what you said became crystallized for you?
What the importance of that statement?
Yes, of the statement you made.
Why am I motivated to say that?
Yes, yes.
Well, I think yes, the injustice came. I think it came before I started photographing the road protests. I was still a student when I started photographing those protests.
Mm,
But I think earlier than that, I'd sort of, like quite a lot of people, I was a raver in the early 90s, and then
mm,
Michael Howard brought out his repetitive beats, the criminal justice bill
yeah.
legislation of 1994, and that kind of criminalized sort of parties outside.
Mm,
And I rejected that idea,
mm,
and in part that was the beginning of the politicization uh,
mm,
of my understanding of the world.
yeah.
And I think it kind of grew from there onwards that and also, from what I sort of witnessed in Bangladesh, not, separate to the cyclone, but, extreme poverty. I mean, like really extreme. It's the second poorest country in the world. I mean, I saw
Mm,
things there I've still never in my life ever seen again. And so, yeah, all these things have an impact and, yeah,
mm.
a sense of injustice.
Yes. Just to bring listeners up to speed a little bit. So Adrian was, I don't know if you were the official photographer, but you were a photographer during the time of the Newbury Bypass, where he took photographs of the activists and their everyday lives and what was happening to them, with them, their protests, where the police were involved, and some of the brutality that actually took place by the police on the protesters. And Adrian actually photographed a lot of that, which is in his book, Until the Last Oak Falls. And some of the photographs are really poignant. And I remember one of the characters who came out of that episode was called Swampy. Actually remember the name because it's an unusual name. And it really was a time when I remember thinking, what's happening? These beautiful trees are being pulled down to make way for a motorway, and these people are protesting. So when you were there, and how long did you stay there for?
Well, for the Newbury Bypass, I built a tree house.
Okay.
So I lived in that tree house on and off over the course of 6 months. So, but it was through the winter. So really, it was sort of October to April.
Yes. And some of your photographs show that it was snowing, it was very cold.
That winter was particularly cold. I mean, some comments you'll read will say it was the coldest winter in living memory.
Yeah,
Either which way, it was extremely cold. It got down to minus 13,
that
which,
is
which you're living,
extreme.
which you're living outside, you know about.
So how did all of you cope in that period of time? There was constant police activity. There were people living up the trees. I remember that there was very poignant photographs of tripods, people standing on one foot. The protesting that went on was extreme and it's almost like martyrdom to me. When I look at your photographs and I see the representation of the endurance of the activists, their determination to protect how strongly they felt about nature and what was being done. When you took those photographs, um, they aren't just capturing moments, are they? I think they were capturing a lot more. I think I read this comment, they were like capturing the consciousness of what was happening at the time.
Yeah. What's the question?
I think you're better at this than I am. So when you're behind the lens and you're documenting the resistance, how do you recognize the moment that might move someone enough to change their way of thinking or even their life? Because hundreds of people were watching what was going on. At the beginning, people were laughing, if I remember, and they were not taking this seriously. And then little by little, a lot of people began to get behind what was happening. So you taking the photographs, did you have your photographs published in newspapers at the time?
Hmm.
So all the papers actually photographing your publishing your photographs?
No, I was having stuff published on occasion. I had stuff published in the Guardian Weekend magazine, the
Mm,
Saturday magazine, and then things like the Big Issue, and then sort of underground publications like Squall.
yeah,
And international publications as well. So it's a sort of variety of
yeah,
publications that were
yeah,
showing my work.
yeah. Yeah, it's your book. I want to just read something, if you don't mind, just a little excerpt from the introduction by Jay Griffiths, and just something that she had written when she says, "Simply living in the protest camps demanded a heroic stamina, particularly in the winters. The temperatures reached 10 degrees below freezing in Newbury, but you mentioned 13 degrees. People got frostbite. The darkness was deadly, depressing. One protester, Balin, spent frozen days and nights up a tripod. A passerby compared him to Don Quixote, wasting his time tilting at proverbials. But the angle of tilt matters. The point where the angle is most acute between the line of heroism and the line of futility is exactly the point where symbols are created. And it is symbols which inspire people. These
Mm,
photographs are a poignant reflection of the passion and the pain, the mud and the magic of the time.
mhm,
I think that when I look at your book and I look through your book and I look at the photographs, I actually see all of that in so many faces of the people. And what
mhm,
strikes me is, the thing with photography is you capture a moment of a person's face. It may not be that he's actually feeling that way at the time, but something. I looked at some of the pictures of the policemen where they looked really angry and annoyed and probably hated the fact that they were being there. Maybe they too didn't want to.
mhm.
Um, Take the prisoners and reprimand them. Maybe their feelings were not as their profession was making them
Of
actually
course.
believe, but the camera captured it at that moment. And it's those moments of emotion that I think really comes through in all your photographs.
Thank you.
And so I think your story in photographs is almost more powerful than having a story written in words.
Well, I mean, the old cliche, photograph is a thousand words.
Yeah, I know.
The way I did this book, and obviously I had Jay write this incredible beginning, which kind of set the kind of foundation for the photographs that then
Mm,
followed. But I deliberately didn't want lots of writing in it because I felt that would be a distraction.
yes,
And I think, the photographs tell the story. But every now and then, in order just to set the context and set the scene, as it were, I do a sort of first person account paragraph
yeah,
that sort of explains what's going on in the photograph and that sort of
yes,
group of
yeah,
photographs.
yeah.
But essentially, the there's a book I love by a French guy called Luc Delahaye, and the book is called Winter Rice, which means journey in winter in Russian. And he
Mm,
basically went, it's kind of like 1994, sort of post-Glasnost, perestroika and all that. And he went on a train journey across, no, it was later than that, actually. I think it's about 2002 or something, so quite a bit after. But when Russia was starting to go into this really sort of dark side,
mm.
what had replaced it. Anyway, he does his journey in the winter, and there's no writing at all in the book, and it's incredibly powerful. I'm obviously acutely aware that I'm talking to a writer as I'm telling this story, so
Okay.
this may not be relevant for those writers that are watching it, because I'm basically saying the fact I really love that book is there's no words in it, but it is an incredibly powerful book because it's just photographs. There is no introduction, there's no nothing, there's no
Mm.
caption or anything, and it just takes you on this journey through Russia in the winter, and it is absurdly powerful.
I think you made a point over there actually about there's no writing in the books. Sometimes when I'm writing, I think words get in the way of how I'm feeling or how I'm actually seeing something in my mind. So for me, photography, really good photography that captures the essence of what is happening, doesn't need the written word.
Yeah, well, I
Mm.
mean, the thing is, the words is always the kind of rationalization of the
Mm,
experience to some degree. And not that I'm trying to say one is better than the other, because they both, are equally powerful and really complement each other.
mm.
But one of the things with the sort of visual understanding is that it is something that it's very experiential. I think the way
Yes.
that relate to a photograph uh,
Mm.
is something you kind of feel in a way that is different to when you're reading, which is there's more of a sort of rationalization because it's put into words
Yes,
of how
yes,
you interpret that
yes,
experience. Thing with photographs is, and visual art per se, is it is an expression of the unexpressible, if that makes sense.
yes, it does. Yes,
You can't, it's quite hard to sort of sometimes find the words to
yes,
express that. And the reason is because you can't, because it's just something you experience
yes.
when you witness that image, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and it's also I feel that you bring your own experience, your own emotion, your own history to that photograph that you're looking at. And therefore, for me, it's often my own interpretation of what I'm looking at, not somebody else's, which is what I also like. So
Hmm.
in your book, when I look through it and I look at the photographs, there's, as you say, very little writing, but I get so much. There's a one picture over here of a violin lying on a sheet on sheets of music on the ground, and
Hmm.
that says so much to me.
Hmm.
And somebody else is has been cooking what looks like mashed potato,
Hmm.
and that says so much more to me than if there'd been any copy attached to these photographs. So the book, I think, is really powerful as a statement of events that took place that still resonate today. So I was having a chat with my daughter-in-law, who mentioned about similar activist movements that took place in Japan around the same period of time. And she did say something that I wanted to ask you about. 25 years, I think, has almost gone by since that particular event took place. Would you say there has been anything that's really positive that's come out of that period of time?
Well, I think it's important to remember, what did the Newbury Bypass achieve? So
Yes.
the next year, the then Transport Secretary of the Conservative government, Stephen Norris, went on to Panorama to say that the protesters were right, and that actually the Newbury Bypass should never have been built.
Mm,
The Tory government went on, and that there were 77 proposed bypasses and they were all cancelled, all of them. So from that point of view, it it certainly achieved something in terms of because the idea is you build more roads, you just fills up with more cars. Building more roads is not the
Yeah.
answer. The
Yeah.
answer is to have a really effective public transport infrastructure,
Mm.
which sadly we don't have
Yeah.
here in the UK. It's very wanton. You know, I live here in rural Devon. It's just it's not non-existent, but it's not
Yeah.
far off it. It's
Yeah.
just totally inadequate. So there's lots to be learned from that point of view. But the government at the time realized that road building roads was not the answer, and the protesters played that role in that, and they did that in many ways by costing the government a huge amount of money because there was 800 security there. And there was a lot of police. So the 800 security came, I think, at the cost of about 25 million. So this is 1996 costs.
Mm.
Don't know what that would be today in modern terms. And the cost of the policing was about 5 million. And what governments don't like is spending lots of money. So
Mm.
that was one issue, was it was cost them a lot of money, and they knew that if they're going to carry on doing this, it's going to cost them lots more money. So that's one of the reasons why they they slashed the budget. And two, because I think, there was also the realization that building bypasses wasn't always the answer. There needed to be a different way of thinking
Mm.
about the movement of traffic and people within the country.
Yeah. Yeah. So coming from Dartmoor, where I believe you now live, with this really wonderful wild beauty, what was it like in a way to witness that same natural world under threat? Now I know that the time frame is not quite the same. To think you've just moved into Dartmoor, or were you already living in Dartmoor at the time?
Well, no, I grew up in Dartmoor, and
Yeah.
then I left basically in 91,
Hmm.
92, and then I came back 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah. But so that whole natural world, does it still shape the way you look at the world now? And do you still have a certain urgency in the work that you do? Because I know that um, I hope I have an opportunity later to talk to you about your filmmaking and the films that you make and the topics and the subjects that you cover. Does that sense of urgency come through in your work at all? Or the way you feel about nature? I think you went to is it Iceland or Greenland? Greenland, I think. The Arctic. You went to the Arctic, didn't you, to make a film?
Ye- Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, what the question is, does my work still have an urgency about
Hmm.
it?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I'm not photographing the protest movement in the same way that I was. Um, and um, I think the urgency of my that is in my work is reflected in a different way, in as much as if you look at the road protests, it was very much frontline photography. The Newbury Bypass was known as the Third Battle of Newbury because the previous two had been in the Civil War.
Hmm.
The road was going to cut through ancient,
Yes.
historic, important Civil War sites. So it was a kind of battleground, and there's actually quite a lot of sort of um, um, analogies I use, between this idea of kind of war and the road protests. There's one of my images that has the police and security guarding all of these diggers as they move through the landscape, and the
Yeah.
diggers are essentially a bit like tanks, and
Yes. Yes.
the security, the foot soldiers, the police are the officers, and you kind of get this,
Mm.
I mean, the photograph that is behind you right now is a frontline battlefield with the police physically trying to drag the protesters out of the trees, which is
Yes.
extremely
Okay.
dangerous.
Yeah.
So, um, so there's a real urgency to that work just because of the nature of what you're witnessing. The kind of work I'm making now, I'd like to feel is also very important, but it's in a kind of different kind of way. The film I made in the Arctic is about how we create a more just, resilient, and sustainable existence for the indigenous and local communities of the
Mm.
Arctic
Mm.
in the face of 21st century climate change.
Yes.
and I've also recently done a film in West Africa in an artisanal gold mine. It's just very much about the human condition. What is it to be an artisanal gold miner in West Africa?
Mm,
What does that journey look like? So they
mm.
kind of, they're different in how I'm approaching them, but I would l like to feel that I would change the word urgency with compelling. So
Okay.
I'd like to feel my work is no less compelling than it was when I was making it
Mm,
25 years ago.
mm. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. I was also thinking that um, book that you produced, um, you actually went through a lot of trouble to ensure its natural, what I call its naturalness, but the way that the materials that we use for your book cover.
Mhm.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because it's quite complex and it was very
Ye-
expensive to produce as well because of the materials
ye-
used.
Yeah, yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, I think, if you're making a book about environmental activism, it'd be sort of ironic if you then made it of really, cheap, plasticky,
Mm,
polluting materials.
mm,
So, I wanted to act with integrity as much as possible and to create a book that was, compostable, made from vegan materials,
mhm.
had as little impact as possible from an environmental perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, certified, wood,
Yeah.
in terms of, for the paper pulp, recyclable materials where possible, so on and so
Mm,
forth.
mm,
It was the publishers, the printers that I used, work with a company where they offset, so the preservation of land and trees, and
mm,
and investing in
mm.
that for the amount that you've worked that you publish with them,
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
print for you.
Mm,
So yeah, in short, I was attempting to make it as um, the book's environmental credentials as strong as possible,
mm.
because that was really important for me.
Yeah, yeah. So you um because this is all about indie authors, there's a question I wanted to ask you. Um, you were self-published to some extent, but you use Kickstarter as your base to get sponsorship for the book. Because I think you mentioned to me earlier that to produce the book was very expensive because it's full of photographs. It's a photographic book, so it's always more expensive. So, did you find that process quite difficult, easy to approach? Did you find that people were very responsive to you in donations to help you raise the funds to produce this book?
I mean, it was a challenge for sure. Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot about doing a crowdfunding campaign, and I mean, I got it over the line. I aimed to raise 16,000. I raised 21,000, so I
Mm,
nicely cleared the line. However, that was because people were out shouting about it, and I obviously did that to the best of my ability, but I was
yeah.
also dependent on other people that had a big voice to be able to shout out about
Mm.
what
Yeah,
I
you
what
need
I was
that
doing.
though.
Yeah, you need that for sure. Yeah, yeah. But it was but I learned some good things about how you make a successful crowdfunding campaign. But yeah,
Mm.
I mean the production of the whole book was I mean it's kind of interesting because I thought I had the idea. Well, actually, what the motivator was the COP. Well, which one was it? 26, the Glasgow one.
Oh
And
yes, I went to
I
that.
thought I thought
Oh
it'd be
yes, we
a
met there.
yeah. So yeah, exactly. So I
Yeah.
thought that would be a good time to. Um, I thought it'd be great to have a book out for that.
Mm.
And so that was the motivator because I thought, what can I contribute to the COP26? And, and obviously all of this, everything that's going on within, the world of climate change and feeling pretty frustrated about that.
Mm.
However, realizing I also had this extraordinary archive of images. So there's not much good of them sitting in a cupboard. It's all shot on negative film and such
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
That was the action. And then thought, well, okay, need to raise the money. I kind of met some actual designers. We, commissioned two designers and we came up with a kind of idea and then thought, right, I need to raise money, raise the money. I thought, oh, great. Well, that's it. That's the hard bit done.
Mm.
But then you've actually got to make the book. And
Yes.
making a photographic book is really not easy. Just the
Mm.
technicality, uh, aspects of having to scan 35 millimeter negative film and to then get all of the colors right once it's printed on paper was a really complicated process. It is really not easy at all because what you see on the screen is completely different to what you get on the printed paper.
Yeah.
And it's only
Yeah.
trial and error and it's really expensive and very laborious. So you had all that, then you've got to get all the layouts and everything right and and lots and lots and lots of other things. So that was super challenging. Anyway, finally got it done and printed, and you're like, oh right, great. Now I can relax. But then you got to sell the damn thing
Yes.
and get everyone to to know about it. And you're like, oh my God. So then on to the next thing. And you've also got all the fulfillment. So everyone who backed the crowdfunding campaign, you've got to make sure they get all their book and everything that they
Yep.
put in, which is also really challenging because people move address and don't tell you,
Mm.
and various other things happen. So books go missing in the post, and so lots and lots and lots of challenges.
Mm.
Um, but it was, yeah, for sure, it was a good experience because I learned a lot, and it's the first of four books. So, I just have to work out how I'm going to do the other ones.
Are you talking about the books based on your films or follow on from this book?
No, neither. So it's other work that I've made.
Okay.
So quite a lot of my work is about countercultural movements. So whilst I was photographing all the environmental protests, at that same time, I was also photographing illegal raves in London. So I made a 2-year body of work called London Acid City. So that's
Oh,
on the
yes.
illegal squat parties. So from
Yes.
96 to 98,
Yeah.
that is a book. And then also similar time, late 90s, I was photographing street photography in London using this tiny little small compact camera shooting on film. Just
Mm.
very much, street photography is kind of defined by a series of non-related images that talk of the wider experience of life, what it is to be
Mm.
alive. And I shot that in quite a personal kind of way. And I think that will make a really interesting book. It's
Mm.
quite
Mm.
poetic.
Yeah.
And then the final of those four books is the work that I'm shooting now, though I haven't shot it actually for a couple of years, though the project is about 80% shot, and that
Mm.
is about the passage of the soul, the journey from fear to love through the use of psychedelic plant medicine. So that's photographing ceremonies for things like ayahuasca and other plants, psychedelic plants.
Mm.
And that's a book about life and death, really.
The subjects are very intense that you've chosen and very complex and visually complex as well as in every other way. So will you, when you publish these books, will you be going down the same route as you did for When the Last Oak Falls?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know because um I mean my reason for self-publishing The Last Oak was because I knew exactly what I wanted. And I knew if I wanted to make a really great book, probably the best way was to just do it myself.
Mm.
And I think that has been the result. I've made what I believe is a really strong,
Mm.
beautiful book.
Mm.
Um, However, for all the reasons I was just mentioning, it's a hell of a lot of work,
Mm.
self-publishing. And there is something to be said for seeing if I could do a deal with a publisher and say, look, I've got three further books.
Mm.
Would you be interested? Um, which yeah, is something I'd certainly like to have some discussions about that. So my next stage is to create three dummy books,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then I can go and approach some publishers and just
Yes.
say, what do you think, and see what they're offering.
Yeah. That's a good way forward. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
but it's yeah, I'm interested in that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because there's a very famous author. You can't call them authoresses anymore. Even we females are called authors now. And she produced a video on how to make a book trailer. And
Mm,
I haven't yet done one, but
mm,
she said it's almost acts like a business card. You
mm,
can send it out to your publishers, your book trailer, and
mm,
they'll get a sense of what your book is going to be about.
mm.
That's always an option, thinking about, the
It's a good
listeners,
idea. It's an
ways
interesting
of
idea.
how do you get your book in front of the people you want to get your book in front of?
Yeah, well, I mean that's like a film. You have to do,
Yes,
a kind of synopsis.
yes,
I mean, it's a
yeah,
similar kind of types idea.
yeah, yeah. So just to come back to when the last oak falls, looking back, how does thinking about the future generations when they pick up your book as an example, what do you hope that they will feel when they pick up the book, know the history behind the story, what happened, and especially when you now say that the government realized that it was a mistake to have built the Newbury bypass and cancelled many plans for bypasses. And how do you hope they'll feel, in their minds emotionally? How will they relay that feeling, that information to their future generations about how the world should be lived in and what we should learn from the past?
Well, one of the reasons why I made that book was, well, there's three reasons. The first was to acknowledge and celebrate those um, those that really put their lives on the line
Mm,
at the Newbury Bypass, at
yeah.
Stanworth Valley, Reclaim Streets, all this kind of thing. The second reason was because there's a younger, newer generation of activists who don't even know anything about this older generation. And
Mm,
I think when you're clearer in the roots of the movement that you so rightly follow, that the deep bit like a tree, the deeper the roots, the stronger the tree. So
mm,
it's harder to kind of push over that movement if they have that connection to the legacy of which they follow.
mm,
So I wanted to make this newer, younger generation aware of what had come before them because it's extraordinary how many people just don't know about it.
yeah.
And then the third reason is because um, since the Industrial Revolution of 1753, half of all the CO2 that's been emitted has been done so in the last 25 years.
Mm,
Now, that last 25 years, so if you go back 25 years ago, that is when the people were in the trees shouting from the top of the trees saying, listen, this relationship we've got to the planet is totally, it's not working, and we really need to change that. And we need to take a fundamentally different approach. And um, if only we'd listened to them then,
yeah.
would we be in the situation that we're in now? And so that, if you want one line about the message of the book, that's what it is. Listen to the activists because they're bang on the money.
Yeah.
We see that around the world right today in a
Yes.
myriad of different issues that are taking place. But generally, listen to the activists because they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
That's been my experience.
Yeah. Thank you, Adrian. I think part of this conversation has really sent shivers through me, thinking about maybe have I also been paying enough attention to what's been going on around? And I think I will be sitting up much more and paying attention a lot more. I live in a part of the world, as you know, up in the Highlands of Scotland, that disturb me sometimes. There is most of the land in Scotland is owned by one Danish guy, and I believe he is very much keen on rewilding Scotland. And yet I will go through the Highlands and I will see acres and acres and acres of land that have been devastated by tree cutting. And the idea is that when the trees are cut, there's a period of time when it lies fallow and then you replant. I don't see replanting going around. Um, so there's a lot of issues of green up here in Scotland. And one of the things I promised myself when I came here is that I would really, really get involved in what's happening up here in the Highlands of Scotland, much more so than when I lived down in Brighton and Hove. Up here, I feel it's so much natural beauty, but there's a lot that lies underneath that isn't healthy. And so
Mhm.
for me, it was really important to come up here and uncover what's really going on the surface, what's going on really underneath. And there's a lot of stuff that I feel concerned about. I really do. But that's another conversation for another time.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of being a creative, right? Is you can empower yourself with taking action
Mm,
in reflecting those issues that concern you.
yeah, yeah,
That's the amazing thing about
yeah.
a creative person.
So, as a final question, what are your hopes for your future in
My
terms of your work or? the way you see your work going forward and influencing future generations?
Well, I think that, um, as mentioned, I've sort of transitioned into filmmaking, which I'm really enjoying the challenge of because making films is that it's really challenging because there's
Mm,
so many things to think about. And I'm working as a self-shooter, which means I film, essentially I direct, produce, put the whole thing together. I've been outsourcing some of the editing, which has been really great.
yes.
Um, but yeah, I'm really enjoying making films, and I think it's a very powerful medium. I think a good film is a very good way at succinctly communicating a lot of very complex information in a
Mm,
relatively short space of time.
yeah.
To a certain degree, you have to move with the times, and in as much as people have, less attention and time-wise and all that. So sometimes, you need to get information over quickly.
Mm,
Not that I'm necessarily saying, 2, 3 minute little social media things is the
yeah.
way ahead, but certainly using moving images, I think, is a very
Mm,
powerful way of
yeah.
communicating important stuff. So
Mm,
I'm hoping, get to make really good powerful, compelling films,
yeah.
documentaries
Yeah.
that move and inspire
Mm,
future generations. And I also want to be making photographic work. I'm, first and foremost a photographer, and that side of me will always be there. And I'm already working on the idea of a new photographic project here in Devon on Dartmoor.
hmm.
So yeah, it's really important I'm doing that as well. I mean, I think, the important thing is to be making work.
Yeah.
It's very easy as a creative person to talk about ideas and then just, live in the ideas and not be in the action. And I
Mm,
can be as guilty of that as the next person. So you've got to be making the work because an idea is an idea. It's nothing but an idea.
yeah.
It's not until you're in action that then you start to have some agency.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, I hope that I've got lots and lots of ideas of things I want
Yeah.
to do,
Yeah.
and I hope that I continue to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Adrian. And as we come to the end of this conversation, that there's so much more I think that we can talk about, especially about your book. What would you like to leave the listeners with that is really personal and important to you about the way you live your life, the way you see the world, the way you would like the impact on future generations to actually take place?
Um, um, I think you've got to make a stand for what you believe in. You've got to act with integrity in your life, and you, um, yeah, exactly that. Make the stand and go out there and do that in whatever shape or form that you understand and you feel will give you some kind of power and agency.
Yeah.
Because I think, there's too much that happens because people remain quiet.
Hmm.
And it's important to stand up for what you believe in.
Yeah.
That's on the one hand, and then I think on the other hand, because the essence, the viewership of this potential piece that we're doing now is for creative people. And I think, back to my earlier point, if you're a creative person and have an idea, then act on that idea
Hmm.
because it is very easy not to act on it. But I also think that an awful lot of, because creative people tend to be quite, um, I think by and large, they tend to be quite, I can't think of the right word, but sort of, they can be nervous of people's opinions of their
Hmm.
work, for
Yeah.
want of a better way of putting it. And therefore, they don't make any creative work, even though they've got the ideas, for fear of rejection, for
Hmm.
fear that their idea will be laughed at, for fear that
Yeah.
the thing that they've made will be ridiculed.
Yes.
Well, sure, that can happen, but, much better to regret something you've done than you haven't done.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so I would say to anyone who's creative and who's got an idea to just fulfill on that and throw it out there because you have no idea where that will go. And I
Yeah.
think, to that point, something like the illegal rave stuff I was photographing in the 90s, there would be points when I was thinking, why am I doing this? Okay, in part I was doing it because I was having a brilliant time because I was going to the race. But it's like, why was I taking a camera with me, making that work? Because it was actually really tough work to make,
Yeah.
photographing in that environment. And then 25 years later, it's plastered all over the Saatchi gallery. And I'm suddenly like, oh, yeah, maybe this is why I was making this work because you had a new generation of people coming
Yes.
seeing that, and then they were moved and inspired, and then they, whatever made whatever they did
Yeah.
of that work, and went on to change or do whatever they did do. But the point is they were exposed to work which they wouldn't have happened had I not made that work.
That's right.
So
That's
that's
right.
the important thing. So I think really, I guess to bring it down to the essence of what I'm just saying here, it's about being in action. If you're not in action, you're no good to anyone.
Mhm. And what I'm seeing now at my stage in my life is how the patterns repeat themselves. So I've got two young grandsons. And when I listen to them talking, I'm thinking, are you old? Are you older than me? Those ideas spin around.
Mm,
And depending upon the way those children are being brought up, they will pick up on it and
mm,
they begin to make it their own. And I think, am I hearing myself talk 25 years later? And
mm,
that's the beauty of all of this. And, I wanted to just end by saying, I never was able to honor those people who protested and stood up for what they believed in extreme conditions at the Newbury Bypass. And I would like to honor them. I know
mm,
maybe I don't know if any of them will ever watch this video, but I have to say I must honor them because 25 years ago I didn't honor them. And now, through your book, through becoming so much more aware, I'd like to say congratulations to them for having the guts, the courage, the love, the awareness of the world in which we live and stand up for their rights. As you mentioned, stand up for what you believe in.
mm. Yeah, well said.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Adrian. I've really loved this conversation. And I hope we get a chance to have a chat again about this another time. Thank
You
you.
too.
And listeners, just to remind you that this platform is all about indie authors as Adrian Fisk. I will ask you a question in a moment, Adrian, before we leave. And please do watch this video, like it, subscribe, share, comment. And one last thing is, Adrian, if anybody would like to buy your book, where can they get it from?
So you can go to my website, adrianfisk.com. I'm just in the process of building a completely new website that reflects
Okay.
more of my film work because people don't actually know I'm making films
Yeah.
just as a
Yeah.
photographer.
Okay.
But currently, the adrianfisk.com one still stands.
Yeah.
Uh, and at some point in the future, it'll be hallucinari.co. But
Oh,
if you put Adrian Fisk into a search engine,
yeah.
you'll come up.
Okay. That's great. Thank you. So just remind you, listeners, it's adrianfisk.com.
Correct.
Great. Thank you very much, Adrian. And I want to see these films of yours. I think some of the films are on your website, some of them,
This is
or
part of the reason why
shorts.
I'm building the website because then they will be available. They haven't been officially released. The two of them,
Okay.
they're going to be.
Okay. Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation and talk to you again soon. Bye for now. Bye.